All right, welcome to Simple Healthy Life, where our goal is to have real, insightful conversations on topics that we find interesting. And today, we decided that we're going to go to one of our formats that pops up every now and again, and this is more like Teach Me. So, uh, I figured today would be a good day to talk about overeating, food reinforcement patterns, and dopamine. And I know that we were actually having a conversation right before this, so I know that it's kind of well timed for you, MJ, because yeah, you're working on some of those things. I mean, we kind of all always are, which is why food and behaviors and eating in general is so hard, because we have to stay on top of it. And you know that I've studied nutrition and worked in the field for, geez, like 15 years. Yeah, 15 years, and maybe like 11 of those professionally, right? And so I've seen a lot. And, one of the things that people think that I do is purely educate, right? And I kind of dislike I kind of dislike that because there is a huge educational component to nutrition, right? But it's everyone is looking for the answer, right? And I'll have like mostly random people like friends or family or whoever will kind of come up to me and be like, I just need I just need the plan. I just need the plan. Like there's one Bible that like is their plan that like works and does everything that they need it to do. And what I know to be true is that no amount of willpower or education or learning really changes eating habits. There is learning that happens much deeper. And this is well understood by me as I see people working on these things. And I hope today to talk a little bit more about what these deeper patterns are and how we can then navigate with them to control overeating and bring that back to a more modulated level.
Okay. So I'd be one of those people that says that I thought you were 100% an educator.
Mm.
So, what other things do you offer to your family, friends, professional clients, like other than education?
Mm. Well, I guess I'll throw it back onto you. Do you just educate people with breath work?
You know, it's funny. I always say my goal when I'm in an environment like professionally or even is to teach, train, develop, and inspire.
Mm.
Like I want to be able to do all of those things for my friends, family, coworkers, professional clients. So yeah, so that's teach. I say teach is like tell,
Hmm.
explain, and then train is like really get into the weeds with them so they can come up with their own examples. Right. So if I was to teach you about the parasympathetic nervous system and how to extend your exhale, then I would offer you the opportunity to tell me when it might be valuable for you.
Hmm.
Right. And then the third one would be develop. And when we develop, we want to work through those examples and give different opportunities to use these different tools. And then the last one, and I think what makes it so valuable is to inspire,
Mm.
right? And not just have this, you know, sit in the classroom, so to speak, but actually say, okay, now this is I don't want to force you to set your calendar reminder for 3 minutes a day and meditate or do breath work. I want you to feel as though it's impactful for you and then inspire you to go ahead and do that. So yeah, so that would be the things that I would say.
Sure. Yeah. And I would say the overlap is pretty much identical in terms of like, some of the stuff that we work on. And yeah, I mean support, right? And that's a big part of it. You could be doing something so right for your body. It could be perfect essentially, and yet you can still sometimes question, right? And to have that support, someone to be like, maybe I think you just kind of continue doing your thing, and you're doing good inputs, like wait for the outcomes to come later on, don't worry about it. Like that's super helpful, right? And people get there's a lot of value in that versus just like here's your plan, follow it, and then see you later, right?
Makes so much sense to me too, especially because you're not gonna it's not gonna flip a switch, right?
Right.
You're not just gonna show up one day and be like, oh, I get it now, and then feel like you get it. Even if you do get it, it's gonna like you said, it's gonna take you a little bit of time of doing the actions repetitively in the right order, time frame, magnitude in order to feel the way you want to feel.
Right. So if I hadn't given you the little primer prior to this, why do you think people overeat?
Oh, well, I can just give you why I overeat.
Yeah. Why do you overeat?
Let's think. I'm an emotional character. um, Emotion for me.
Mhm.
I would say that one of the things that I've been using food as for a long time is reward. And I specifically like that reward at night.
Mm,
Like it's like a non-alcoholic nightcap for me. Like I
mm,
like to close my day with food. And the second part is I find it hard to cook just the amount that I'm supposed to be eating,
mm.
if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Like I don't cook 4 ounces of meat. I cook a pound of meat.
All the meat.
I cook all the meat. Yeah. Yesterday I cooked 2 pounds, and then my wife just doesn't eat enough. No, and then it's gone. No, I think it's emotional for me, and I think it's. I've been told that I don't eat enough throughout the day, so then at night I sit down and my body maybe is like let's eat all the food,
Mm,
and then it becomes habit.
mm.
So those would be my three answers
Sure.
to why
Yeah.
I overeat.
Yeah, no, great answers. Yeah, I think the reward value is something that we're going to be talking about. To you, why is it, consciously without like again taking a little bit of a primer into it, why is it that you think you would choose like ice cream, for example, later after night for what is to you, what is rewarding about that?
Well, the taste
Hmm.
for sure. Um, I would say the taste and maybe a little bit of knowing or feeling like it's bad. Like I get to like I'm doing something like that. I just
You
I
sinner, you.
yeah 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 probably a little bit. Um, and then I think maybe growing up like this was like a treat. Like oh let's have some ice cream. Like oh you did a good job on your homework right. Like let's have some ice cream. That
Mm,
was a bad example. I never did homework, but like something to that effect.
right.
And so I just continued to use it that way.
Mm. Would you be surprised to understand that taste doesn't seem to impact how much we eat of a food? It impacts a little bit of our choice, but very rarely determines if we overeat.
I don't know. So you're saying that, I mean, I guess when you say it that way, it makes sense because I overeat all sorts of things.
Hmm.
Um, but I like the taste of all the things I overeat.
Hmm. So I'm challenging you with this thought because taste is entirely a conscious experience, right? You say, well, I like the taste of it because I know that I experience it. It's right then and there, and I feel it in whatever my brain or on my tongue or wherever that is felt. But when it comes to food physiology, it doesn't seem that taste impacts our quantity of food that we eat. It doesn't seem to change that. And you know all well and good, you kind of alluded to it. There are plenty of times we overeat on foods that don't taste good, that are subpar. You have a donut and it's like, old Dunkin' Donuts donut, but you still can't help but to have many of them. Or even ice cream that's like somewhat subpar, right? Like that in and of itself kind of shows us that sometimes we lack control even with foods that aren't even that good. I've had moments myself where I'm like eating foods and I'm like, why am I even eating this? I don't even like it. Like I actively will dislike food sometimes and still be compelled to eat. And so I think it seems very paradoxical, and that's why this is an interesting topic, is because when we think about People who I don't know, even like your conception of people who might overeat more often than not, you might think, well, they just really like food, right? They just really like that experience of eating. When what we know about how we behave around food is almost none of it is conscious, a very little part of it. So it's not necessarily about education. It's not necessarily about the taste experience. It's not about labels. It's not about any of that. It's in fact much, much deeper. And that's kind of what I'm alluding to and why I think it's so cool is because there are things happening in the body that are reinforcing your decisions without you even understanding that.
Oh, really? Okay, so I guess I understand a little bit, right? So you're not consciously metabolizing your food, right? I'm not consciously breaking
Right.
it down. Once it gets past my mouth, I'm no longer conscious of how long it takes to go through the system
Mhm.
and produce energy and do all the things, turn it into vitamins and nutrients and do all those things. So are you saying that that's the subconscious level, like essentially?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it seems that like food, the reward value of food is determined by the metabolism of the food, not necessarily our conscious experience with the food.
Huh.
Mhm.
That's okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. So like I'm well, you're saying it's both. There's an element to me like me using food for for my emotional
Hmm.
attachment to it and me using food because I like the taste of it. But once that post that, so that's essentially once it's in the body,
Hmm.
now the body's reaction to it is reinforcing my desires for that type of stuff.
Yeah, essentially. And so to break it down even further, and this is where we'll kind of get to, we're going to talk about like how this process works, and then how we can actually use the understanding of this process to solve the problem, quote unquote, of overeating. And keeping in mind too that overeating isn't necessarily problematic in and of itself, but the pattern of overeating certainly is, just as the pattern of undereating would be problematic, right? Or drinking, right? Like the pattern of over drinking is problematic, but having a drink on a Friday night because you're out with friends is really not a problem, right?
Okay.
So it's more like we're talking about patterns, and that's the important distinction here. And it just so happens that for many people, they struggle with the patterns of overeating, and this is obviously very concerning for people. Um, and so what happens basically is I'm gonna just use potato chips because why not? So you see this bag of potato chips, you open up your cupboard, you see the bag of potato chips, and you eat that. It goes into your mouth, obviously, you chew it, it goes down your esophagus into your stomach. Your stomach starts to mechanically digest that in some way and then releases parts slowly of that potato chip into the intestine. Your body is signaled with reward value as soon as it hits the small intestine, but not necessarily before that. And so I find that very interesting. And so specifically when carbohydrates and fat, and we've heard these kind of like hyper palatable and hyper process or ultra processed foods, like that's the kind of a topic of conversation. But the combinations of these two nutrients seem to impact this reward value a bit more. And that's because fats, when those are digested in the intestine, they hit the intestine and start the digestion process. This triggers the vagal nerves to then communicate up to the brain. And the vagal nerves are basically your kind of rest and digest. Parasympathetic, it makes up 75% of that. So that's basically what that is. But that communicates from the gut to the brain and says, we got fat. That's really great. I love this nutrient. Let's do more of what we just did. The same thing kind of happens with carbohydrates because carbohydrates are broken down into sugars. That is absorbed by the intestine, transported via the portal veins, and then that goes to the liver and does the exact same thing. Oh, we just got some great nutrients in. Like let's exert the dopamine. Let's like release some of that. Let's do that again. And so do what again? And the what is where it started. I opened up the cupboard, I saw the chips, and very quickly, very soon after, I got these rewarding nutrients. That's a good action. Let's do more of that. And so the brain then learns that every time, or hopes to learn that every time I open the cupboard and there's chips there, this is a very rewarding activity. And all of this happens despite the fact that, like, yes, it's pleasurable taste wise and all that. Despite all of that, despite the conscious experience, most of that drive for the behavior is actually happening via those processes, the low road, the things that you don't actually experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple things. I find it to be incredibly interesting that what you're saying now is essentially, and I'm going to try to like paraphrase this in a way that makes sense to people. Your body's talking to your brain,
Mhm.
right? And it's not. I think we've always been kind of taught when we were younger, like it's your brain does all the thinking, your brain does all
Mm.
the making sense of the way the world is. Your brain does all the making sense of the way you're eating. Your brain is doing all of the things, and your body is just like this lump that we're just feeding in order to keep it moving, right?
Yeah.
It kind of is the way that I feel like we've been taught.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is like it's subconscious. It's not a brain thing. It's the body gets when it hits that small intestine, the nutrients are then pushed in a certain way, and it's essentially pushed back up to the brain, not the nutrients, but the signal is pushed back up to the brain that says, do more of this. This is good for me. I like this. Let's continue to work on this pattern.
Yeah, it actually it's directly connected to the brain. And this is like it's so cool because yeah, they're finding out a lot more about the intestines and the gut in general. Um, but they know that the the gut is responsible for many of the features that we would almost expect the brain to be responsible for. I mean, we've talked about it before, but 90% of our serotonin is produced within the intestinal cell wall, or like in the enterocytes in the intestine, which is super cool, right? And so, and then you have like the whole interactions with the microbiome and how those actually produce neurotransmitters and everything, and digest certain nutrients and produce other nutrients. Um, but yeah, this communication, for all intents and purposes, the gut is a second brain. It actually has 100 million neural cells. So the neurons, there's like maybe 100 billion or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but there's maybe a billion something in the brain neurons. But there's the exact same things in the intestine, in the gut, just a smaller fraction, but still there nonetheless, still a good amount nonetheless.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And the more aware I am of when I do overeat, the more it makes sense to me. And so let's say that we're eating something that takes a while to digest. Let's just if you could explain to me how if you take something like potato chips that you chew, it becomes kind of well mechanically digested, no, broken down.
Yeah.
I think you break it down pretty good,
Mechanical
right?
digestion is the
Yeah.
right term for that.
And then it gets into the belly, it gets into your stomach specifically.
Mhm.
Probably doesn't take very long to turn that into whatever's going out of the belly into the small intestine,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Versus something like chicken,
Sure.
right? Like you chew it up pretty good, and then it probably sits in the stomach. I would imagine longer, right? Because protein takes longer to digest than carbohydrates,
Mhm.
and so now that reward, that subconscious reward, is delayed. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Though there's a bit of nuance there with the specific examples. Um, so well, I'll cover the gaps that we're missing here. So the gut is reinforcing the reliability of energy, essentially. So if there's something that you're doing and it leads to reliable energy or nutrients, then the gut says, "Wow, that's really good. Let's do more of that." And so the pace at which food moves through those steps, from chewing to stomach to intestines, or from even earlier on, is really important. It's almost like, If we recall back to Pavlov's dog, right? And this is that classical conditioning when he rings the bell and he gives the dogs food, right? And he continues to do that very reliably. He rings the bell, gives the dog food shortly after. And then eventually, obviously, what happens is he rings the bell and then the dog's mouth salivates, but there's no food. He doesn't give them the food. So what was learned through that is that there's conditioning that happens, again, not consciously either. The dogs aren't like, I'm getting food now. They're not like thinking that. I mean, at least we don't think that, but we understand it to be a very physiologic response. So that's a great example because if we're eating something like potato chips, which is a good example, it's almost like ringing the bell. We see the bag of potato chips, ring the bell, and then food, reliable energy comes into the intestines pretty quick. Like it doesn't take long. Or like soda is a great example. You see the bottle of soda, there's a commercial or whatever, that's your cue. Let me think about this. Oh yeah, every time I've thought about soda or had it in front of me or whatever, I've drank that, and that's a reliable energy source. That happens very quick. It's like ringing the bell and then getting dinner immediately. But the point here is that we can actually help control that response. And this response is absolutely happening. There are people out there who are thinking, well, that's not me. I'm just going to override that. I'm gonna willpower through it. No, you're not. You're just not. Like you have to accept that you're human and you're kind of driven by an autopilot most of the time. But to extend the amount of time between the cues and the seeing the food and the types of energy coming in, to extend that process out is actually how you would overcome those patterns. It would be like taking the bell, ringing the bell for the dogs, but not giving them food until an hour later. There's no association going to develop because now it's too long. It's too long of a time, right? No pattern is reliably established. Does that make sense? Are we following?
I get the I get the I get the extended period of time from like a mental standpoint, like, but how does that play into it when it is actually flipping from the stomach to the small intestine? Like, how does that? Does it make sense? Like, so you see the bag of chips, you're like, I want that bag of chips, and then you're like, maybe in an hour, I'll eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're saying? Or you're saying like, eat the bag of chips slower?
Hmm. Well, both. There's a couple of different ways. You had mentioned like, okay, uh, chicken versus potato chips or something like that, right? I will note that protein doesn't seem to elicit the same rewarding response. It's not metabolized in the same ways as fat and sugar. And so that one doesn't seem to be particularly rewarding. And so if you have a pattern that's been hard to break, so for example, it's 8 o'clock at night. You have the lights low. You sit on the couch.
I already feel seen.
You're like, I'm already hungry.
I don't know where you're going with this, but I'm sure it's me. Go on.
Fire,
M&M cookies, by the way.
yeah, firing up Netflix, right? You're not necessarily sitting there and saying, it would be I'm verifiably hungry. I need this amount of nutrients. I'm gonna go make a mindful decision. You're just not, but yet we do it anyways, right? We like to sit on the couch and have our thing because the body has then established this is the whole point. The cue is the setting. So the cue is 8 o'clock, Netflix, couch, low lights, right? When the body sees that, the body experiences this. It says, I know a predictable way to get energy. Go get your food of choice. Go get your cookies, your whatever, your
Got it.
cakes.
Okay, now I'm getting it.
Okay. So that's the cue. And then the response from the body is, let me do this thing because this is how I get quick energy. I love it. And this is why it's so hard to break, is because this on repeat really solidifies a pattern. And so it can be very, very difficult for someone to break because it's nearly automatic. It's about as automatic as it gets. No matter how much you say, well, it's not really that great for me, and this and that. I mean, you're going to be able to like willpower through some of that sometimes, of course, but reliably, No, because the brain has established such strong dopaminergic circuitry and reinforcing patterns that it's just so hard to break that.
Oh, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I can picture myself. And the thing that hit home with me is like, so first of all, I do exactly what you just said. It's not Netflix. It's right after Jeopardy. It is. We watch Jeopardy while we eat dinner at the table, and then when we're done, I usually go to the couch, turn the lights down. That's 8 o'clock, 8:15, 8:20, or whatever, 8:30. And I don't wait an hour to go get my snack, even though I'm literally just finished eating dinner. Like bring it to the couch with me. Like I'm like, all right, now my next step is to like go into my cupboard and get whatever snack I plan on eating that night, and right then.
Yep.
So like, yeah, that's it's kind of eye-opening for me that my environment and my repeated behavior is triggering my overeating.
Right. And very, very important. Now, this is really an important distinction because I think a lot of people are saying, well, that's obvious, Ryan. That's a habit. It's a bad habit. Like, that's how habits work. Yes, but it's not the conscious experience.
Right.
It's not that. It's how the food is metabolized. And so this is where the nuance kind of comes into play. And this is where we can then, not say, oh, I just need more willpower. I need more education. I need the perfect plan, because that's not what it is. And that's a very important distinction, and why it makes it so, so interesting. And it's the same logic as like like a phobia or something. Like a little spider causes this like, whoa, like that. Gotta kill it. Gotta get, gotta scream and shout at it. Like gotta run away. I think most people with a spider arachnophobia or whatever can say, well, it's just a little spider. Like it's not going to hurt me, but it elicits something in you. And so if you can accept that that exists in you in some way, maybe not arachnophobia, maybe it's, I don't know, snakeophobia or heightphobia, whatever those are called. Then you can accept that this pattern is the exact same thing. It happens in the same way. There's no logical reasoning as to why you're Netflix eating. It just is, or Jeopardy eating. It just kind of happens, and with the same assurity, the same reliability as the person seeing the spider, right? It happens in that way. And so now the question is like, how do we solve that? Like, how do we make it so that we can decrease that reinforced pattern, right? And we can kind of use some of the same logic then. And you've kind of already like pondered on that and reflected. So I guess I'll throw it to you. Just given the fact that it works in that way, you're cued, and then the body senses when food gets to the intestine, this is a reliable source of energy. How do we then start to solve this over time?
I mean, I imagine changing the cues is valuable, right? So
Sure.
like I picture my own self like just going into a different room, right? Don't just go from the couch from the the island in the kitchen directly over to the couch, because I can say that if I could just not grab the cookies on my way by, but after a few minutes I'll be sitting on the couch thinking I should just go over there and get the cookies. So maybe changing that environment a little bit
Definitely.
to be like in a different, maybe it's just a different room, or maybe I sit in my dining room instead of my couch or whatever. I feel friction around that, even saying it. So it feels it's probably something I should change, because I'm thinking to myself like, oh man, I'm doing so consistent with what I'm doing that maybe something like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a good example of like, okay, yeah, I'm being cued. So I just don't want to be cued anymore, because I know that my actions preceding are not entirely self-serving. I will argue that sometimes the most reinforced patterns are often the ones in where we can't control the environment. And so like arachnophobia is a great example. You can't just say, well, I'm just going to avoid the spider then, because spiders, I mean, you could do all you can to like manage that. You
Right.
could like, plug the holes in the walls and get pest control and put up traps and all that. But I don't think there's any amount of reliable management to prevent that. And so what happens when that can't be prevented, right? And the most reliable reinforced patterns are probably the ones that are hardest to also change, right? Late at night, winding down on TV. I mean, it makes sense, right? So while you're right, like if we can change the cues in a way that make perfect sense or maybe are easier to do, then great. But what if when the cues aren't? And what I would offer for everyone here is that we need to lengthen the time between the cue and then the intestinal reward, essentially, or the time that it takes energy to get into the intestine. And so how do we do that? I mean, there's a couple different ways. One, one method, I guess we would call it, would be cue exposure in response prevention or response management. And so I know that's a bit of a mouthful.
So essentially, I think what you're saying is like go over to the couch and sit on the couch and watch Netflix, but wait like a full 45 minutes or something
Mhm.
before you go and get your snack.
Yeah, yeah. So you would expose yourself to the cue and then do your best, right? Again, this is like it's kind of hard to do, but you work on it. You do your best to assure that the reliable energy source isn't hitting your intestine fast because you don't want the brain to make that association. Every time this condition is set up, reliably, I'm getting the energy. You don't want that, or you want it to be very, much slower. So there is times where you can say, perhaps you say, well, Mondays are the night that I'm gonna like set for myself. I'm gonna do like a little self-binding contract, and I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna do this on Mondays unless I'm verifiably hungry, right? And there's other ways that we've talked about how to kind of do some of those kinds of things. So I'm not gonna get into it, but like hunger scale, mindful awareness of hunger and fullness cues, like those are all very important. But on Monday, I'm gonna expose myself to the cue, but I'm gonna actually interrupt that pattern. I'm gonna not eat, right? So that's one option. The other option could be a different type of food or a different way of approaching the food. So you could expose yourself to the cue, the Netflix, couch, Jeopardy, late at night, and you could then eat something that takes much longer to digest and is therefore a much less reliable energy source as deemed by the body. So, if it were potato chips or cake or cookies or something like that, you could do something that doesn't have a high reward value as far as the body goes. Beef jerky is kind of an interesting example. Like some people really love beef jerky, um, but for the body, doesn't really have that much. It doesn't elicit that much dopamine, and so
Okay, I have a. I want to. I want to ask a question.
sure.
Um, I feel like there's, and maybe so. Okay, my brain just went specifically to my my habit of when I'm cooking dinner,
Mhm,
and I'm good about this. When you said, okay, on Mondays I'm not going to do this or
mhm,
whatever, right? I was like, I have a couple things where I think about like, oh yeah, on Mondays I don't do that, right? Or usually because of the weekend I went too hard or something crazy.
mhm,
But when I like to open a bottle of wine when I cook,
mhm,
and I like to have a glass of wine, and I almost feel like this is the same mechanism, the same kind of cue, like, all right, I'm walking into my kitchen. Okay, I know my next thing is to cook dinner. Okay, I'm going to open that bottle of wine. And oh, by the way, before I even finish cooking dinner, I'm going to have like a mental and physical response, right? I'm going to have
mhm.
a little buzz, or I'm going to feel the wine and I almost feel like that's like what you're saying, only I can feel it. Whereas the other way is like subconscious, like the food is doing it subconscious and I can't feel that, even
Right,
though that's what's happening.
right.
But the alcohol is like an example of it doing the same kind of thing,
Yeah.
but I can feel it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and it's a good point is because food has this additional pathway, these additional pathways, the gut is communicating directly to the brain in a different way, then it does make it much more reinforcing. There are probably other mechanisms for drugs, right? Like drugs are obviously dopaminergic in their own ways. So they have their own pathways, but certainly is the case where specific foods and specific nutrients seem to elicit these like super additive kind of like reward or reinforcing patterns. And so the types of foods make a difference, the types of things that you interact with. But that's, I mean, this is like that kind of stuff is habit building in a nutshell, right? Like cue, response, right? Got to have a cue, and then we have a typical response, and we train ourselves to do this, right? But you're exactly right. There is underlying patterns when it comes to food and potentially drugs and stuff that make that a little bit more challenging to navigate. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we can cue exposure and response, prevention or management. Monday night wine kind of example. What we could do with this is we could say, well, I seem to do this every Monday night or every weekday or something. I am going to pick a day and I'm going to expose myself to this cue and I'm going to be mindful and aware and I'm going to limit that. I'm going to either push it off as far as I can or I'm going to not do it at all. And then the other nights I can do it, right? And it's really important that you start out with that because you're not going to be able to, again, willpower, this kind of like motivational capacity, mental capacity, it only extends so far, right? It's basically we have a gas tank to that, and so you have to exert this in meaningful ways, and so you use a little bit of your willpower, motivation, mental capacity to do something challenging, such as avoiding the Monday night wine, and then the other nights I'm going to allow it, right? What this does is kind of save some of that decision making for you for later time. So you can continue the Mondays and start decreasing that the volume knob on that habit. Essentially, it has to be slow, and that's what's not glamorous about true change is that it is slow and takes a while, but true change is true change, which is really great. So, so that's one example. Keeping in mind that these cues can be different. It could be just dinner. At dinner, I overeat. Okay, and the conditions of dinner are all reinforced, and I always end up overeating at dinner. I always sit there afterwards, feeling like, man, I just went too far. Okay, so in which case, the cue is dinner, and what we should be doing and probably prioritizing again is the time that it takes the body's intestinal tract to absorb energy. Okay, so how do we extend that? Slow down. Be at dinner, eat real slow. One of the most helpful tips, I swear, like this is like one of the if everyone did this, there would be 50% less overeating. And I'm going to give you this with this one tip right now, and I truly believe this is if you enter the meal slow, then you're going to continue the rest of the meal slow. You're going to eat more mindful, and you're going to stop when you're full. Right? It's the most simple tip, but sometimes the most simple tips are the ones that really help the most. And so you have the plate in front of you, dinner plate in front of you. You're just gonna sit there. You're gonna breathe. You do some, you're a fan of that breath work, right? Like just one big breath. You're gonna enter nice and slow, even if it's like a really good one, like pizza or something. I actually love to practice this with pizza because it also trains that part of me that's like, I want to do a challenging thing, and it's kind of challenging to not like to be hungry and be in front of pizza and like control your response, right? But that's exactly why we do it. So we have an intentional entering of the meal very slow, and then we eat very slow, right? Most people eat between 5 and 10 minutes, right? You even told me you had like a massive meal the other night and it like 17 minutes for a massive meal. It realistically should be around 25 minutes to 30 minutes in an ideal world. And the reason is because the slower you eat, the less energy is kind of dropped into your intestine and it's better. The other thing that you can do in terms of like slowing this response is you can eat foods that are a little harder to digest, right? Complex carbohydrates, things with a lot of fiber. These are a little bit more, tough to kind of break down in the stomach themselves, right? You eat some salad first off. The body doesn't say, well, we just drop this salad right into the intestine. No, it has to actually slow everything down because your intestines can't handle full chunks of salad, and it has to mechanically digest. That's what that like gurgling and acid and all that is for. And then it will start to slowly release contents of the stomach into the intestine, and that's very helpful. Again, kind of mediating the energetic response there. Okay, following?
I love that. That makes total sense to me.
Yeah. And so a classic example of this, and this actually is helpful in immeasurable ways. Pizza night, have a salad first. Eat that slowly. Eat it mindfully. Enjoy it. Take it easy. And then afterwards, call it like 5 to 10 minutes afterwards, like you're eating your salad nice and slow, then get into the pizza. Eat that slow, right? And the response management that you elicit just from that action is more powerful than any kind of plan or any kind of tip or whatever. It's just practicing because you're reinforcing to the body that, like, ooh, being in front of pizza, being on pizza night doesn't actually lead to reliable, quick energy. In fact, it took some time. And so I'm going to like decrease the reinforcement there. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
The other thing that we can do here is we can modulate our vagal nerves through breath work, through meditation, and the kind of like relaxing kind of things that we like to do. What happens when those things are activated? It seems to be the case that when we engage that like parasympathetic, so we go from like very flight or fight oriented and we engage into the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, it seems that like our appetite is a little bit more modulated, and probably because it is rest and digest, your system is activated. Guess what digestion is? Also the production of satiation hormones. Okay, so that system needs to be active. It needs to be on when you're eating. In fact, one of the most common reasons why people experience stomach pain and like IBS like symptoms is because they're very stressed, and then they're eating when they're very stressed, and their system isn't resting and digesting, right? Very obvious. It's like it seems too simple, but in fact, I would say that's 90% of GI pain. At least I experience, like see in an everyday situation. So there's that. We talked a little bit about like the design of the meal, making sure that there's a lot of fiber, there's a good amount of protein. Those two things are helpful for this process to kind of turn down the volume knob on the reinforcement. The other thing is um, we talked about like how fat signals to the vagus nerve up to the brain that like, hey, that's rewarding, and carbohydrates do the same thing just through the portal vein to the liver. Both those nutrients are highly rewarding to the body, and they taste good too, so there's that. But if you have these quintessential combinations of fat and carbohydrates, it does seem that that's a little harder to break, because again, this reward mechanism is not only traveling through one system, it's now two pathways that are reinforcing that. So pizza, very quintessential food, but carbohydrates and fat, right? And so if you're making a dinner or lunch or something, and it seems that like fat is the star of the show, you're having like some like avocado and steak and whatnot, then it probably makes sense to have a smaller amount of carbohydrate, right? Like make that the side little guy. Have something very complex. Have something kind of maybe less starchy, like I don't know, like corn instead of rice or whatever, right? Like though, like make one of those the star of the show, while protein is, I mean, maybe protein realistically is the star of the show if you're actually doing this. Protein and vegetables, always probably primary components of a healthy meal. But make one of those guys the second main character or whatever, however you want to say it. Does that make sense? Kind of balancing those
Yeah.
out. Okay, good. Um, and then just making sure that I suppose if dessert is an important thing, which we already talked about, like Jeopardy dessert or late night couch dessert or whatever it is, space out far from dinner. Okay, like I say, like 60 to 90 minutes, because what that's going to do is your body's going to be kind of like digested of all the other things first, and you're not going to be additionally reinforcing overeating, then you can get into dessert, take it slow, take it mindful. And yeah, if you can't avoid the things that are already broken down, there's like highly processed things, I mean, obviously are not the best for us. And so if you can take a highly processed thing, couple Oreos, two Oreos, can you pair that with something that then is not like fruit, for example? Right? It does you good. It does you good to not just have the two Oreos and whatnot. And it's also not, this is
It's
another,
funny that you said 2 Oreos.
yeah, I know.
Like, sorry, go on.
Right? I know. I'm wishful thinking. But that's exactly, the point here too. Um, another thing that I want people to understand is that it's not really about avoiding the food.
Right.
And the reason for this, again, very, very important. The reason for this is that if you avoid Oreos or cookies or cake, you may not have that food for a period of days or weeks or whatever. But often, when you have that food again, it is highly rewarding. It does taste good and it's an event. And then you introduce the same mechanism, only supercharged. Ooh, when I had Oreos, wow, that I had a lot of energy coming in and it was very rewarding and it tasted so good because I had pushed it off for so long. It was better than I anticipated. You supercharge that system and it makes it again, you're gonna have a much harder time navigating situations with Oreos, cakes, and whatever. In fact, what you want to do you want to have Oreos in appropriate amounts that maybe make you laugh. Two Oreos plus something else on the side. Eating very slow, eating very mindfully. Then the cue of the Oreo in front of you becomes less rewarding, less reinforced. So you have to have exposure to the cue. That's the whole point. Like we said, you can't always change how those cues. You can't control that the spider pops up on your table, and you can't control that the Oreo pops up in front of you when you're at a friend's house. You can't control that, but you can actually take the cue and you can manage that in a way that feels good. You can teach your brain like, okay, it's not a big deal. I have two Oreos. I have some other kind of fibrous whatever thing with it, and then you don't get a huge energy dump into the intestine. In fact, it wasn't even that strong to begin with. There you go. Good. Okay.
Makes total sense.
Okay. So basically, the whole point is overeating is something that we overeating is something that we are trained to do through mechanisms we're not consciously aware of. And so the only way to truly change without an incredible amount of friction on your motivation or willpower or mental capacity is by slowly taking these cues and changing your response to that in a meaningful way that feels like you can actually do it. It's not going to be possible for someone who overeats every day to just not overeat, continue, every day. But will it be possible for one meal or will it be possible for one day? Potentially. And as you start to do that slowly, the volume knob on the reinforcement turns down, and then you'll be able to navigate food in a much more healthy way.
So when we started at the beginning of this thing, and you said we talked about education, and I said I think that it's important to teach, train, develop, and inspire. I feel like you might have just done all 4 of those things.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. I certainly know that I have not only now understand better, but also have at least a tool in my tool belt and a clear understanding of ways that I can make these small changes.
I love it.
And I do feel inspired to make them because it doesn't feel overbearing.
Right.
It doesn't feel like I'm like, oh no, fuck, darn, I can't eat ice cream forever. I can. What I can do is I can choose a couple days where maybe I don't altogether, just to try, just to push my envelope. I can wait when I'm on the couch to go and get that ice cream. I can have a small piece of fruit with my ice cream, and I can essentially work to limit the amount of ice cream that I'm eating at the same time. And all of those things don't seem overbearing. It feels like I can try each one of those things, maybe alone or together, or maybe put them all together. And eventually I'm working my way towards, less overeating.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Because the lack of control and overeating with food isn't about loving food too much. It's not about the fact that you just don't have control. It's a personality trait. It's in fact how your gut teaches your brain how to respond to food. And so if you take control of that and you start making little changes to that, then you're going to slowly but surely start feeling better because it doesn't happen on the conscious level, on the level of education all the time or of taste or whatever. It happens on that lower road. Okay. So yeah, if you like this episode, please, yeah, drop us a follow or a like or some sort of interaction, whatever you got on there. That's pretty cool. And then we will catch you next time. Thanks.